The one where Ross moves in is the 7th episode of the 5th season of Friends. This is directed by Gary Halvorson, and as always there will be spoilers from now as I go through the episode and share some thoughts. Sometimes I will go through things chronologically, but with this one I've grouped my notes by 3 main parts of the narrative, and to be honest, 2 parts of it I don't find that interesting. I don't dislike them, but I just don't find them that fascinating. But one part I think is brilliantly done, and that's the part with Ross, so we'll come back to that at the end. But first of all, we have part of the story focusing on Monica initially, and she's getting a health inspection from somebody called Larry. Phoebe happens to be visiting the restaurant at the time, and Phoebe ends up getting a date with Larry. We then see Phoebe and Larry at a restaurant, and Larry ends up telling them they need to leave because he saw at least 10 violations on the way to the bathroom, and then he starts to shut down all of their favourite places, and Phoebe realises that dating him is not that fun. And we then have the scene that I thought was brilliantly done, and this is one bit that I did enjoy about this part of the story, where Larry meets Phoebe in Central Perk, and he sees some milk sitting out, and then Gunther comes through the main area with some trash bags where he's meant to take them out of the back. And for a moment, it seemed like Larry was about to try and shut down Central Perk. And that was going to be one step too far for Phoebe. So I like how she handled this. The thought of her drinking that milk was disgusting, but I didn't mind that scene too much. But Larry, I think, is not a very interesting character. He's fine. I don't mind him. I pretty much have the exact same feeling about Danny. And we do have part of the episode focusing on Danny and the fact that he hasn't asked Rachel out for another date. He then sees them and he explains that he's having a housewarming party. And it was a little bit awkward because he didn't invite them. Not that he necessarily shouldn't invite them, but it is awkward to go on a date with somebody but then not invite that person to your housewarming party. It's a bit strange, particularly as he then does invite them, and Rachel pretends that she's got to go to a regatta gala, so she can't go, and she did this so he didn't think she was just waiting around for an invite to the party. And honestly, the way this played out, I didn't mind as well. It's not that interesting. What I did get really annoyed by about this part of the episode is he's having the party and everybody's just spilling out into the hallway. That would be so irritating if you lived in that building and somebody had a housewarming party in the corridor. That's going to get annoying. So that was a little bit selfish of Danny, but at the same time, Rachel coming up the stairs pretending she's just got back from the gala, I didn't mind that. I thought it was interesting enough, but again, I don't really care for Danny as a character either. So those parts of the episode were okay, but I didn't love them. I don't think I ever have really cared for them. But with Ross, Chandler, and Joey, it really makes up for it. Ross has been kicked out of the apartment because he was subletting Emily's cousin's apartment. Obviously makes sense that he would be kicked out there. And Joey and Chandler say that he can move in with them. And the next thing they know, their rooms are filled with boxes everywhere. And Ross has brought over his air purifier and he starts to make the quiet down hand gestures, which I do think became pretty iconic. And they're not happy with Ross living there. It seems like they can't live in their own space the way they're used to. So they encourage Ross to look at an apartment and they end up feeling awful because they really encourage Ross to take this tiny apartment that's available now. And Ross does realise what they're getting at, and they feel guilty for that. So somebody phones up to get a reference, and Chandler lies loads to make Ross seem like he would be a really terrible tenant. And as awful as that sounds, it's a very sweet thing to do. And they realise that what they did was just not a great thing to do. And we have a wonderful moment at the very end where we have all of Ross's boxes that Joey had turned into a fort. And it turns out Joey and Ross are playing in the fort. And then Chandler joins them and puts on the little bonnet. And It's adorable. It's a nice way to end the episode. So the part of the episode focusing on Chandler, Joey, and Ross, I did love. Really thoroughly enjoyed that. Larry was not very interesting as a character. Danny, I don't mind. Rachel going to the gala was fair enough, but it definitely wasn't that fascinating. For me, I've never really been that bothered about Danny, but thankfully the story with Ross was interesting enough to carry everything else. And ultimately, I like this episode. The one where Ross moves in is never going to be an all-time favourite. The hand gestures, however, definitely. The episode gave us something brilliant there. In all, it's not bad, but the one where Ross moves in is not an all-time favourite.